Today we analyze month number 4 of the Golden Age of comic books. September 1938 is the cover date of 23 different comics on the newsstands that particular time. Let's analyze the rarity and the value and collectability of all of these books. This is only month number 4 of the Golden Age, which started with the beginning of Superman debuting in Action Comics number 1. So this month we have Action Comics number 4. Once again, Action Comics number 4 is by far the most common book on the CGC census. Generally, the high price tag has brought copies out. And there's even one copy graded 9.0 or higher. However, this is the first month that Action Comics is not the most valuable comic of the month. Jumbo Comics number 1 debuted this month. In low grade and high grade, it is more valuable than Action Comics number 4. This is a major key book featuring the first work of Jack Kirby and the first published comic from the new publisher Fiction House. Jumbo Comics number 1 through 8 are oversized comics, not in the standard size, and therefore cannot be graded by CGC. So you will see they have a score of 0 on our CGC census. So that affects our chart a little bit. So if they could have been graded, it would be interesting to see how common the book is. Again, the high price tag will make copies surface more than some of the cheap books. And looking at the cheap books at the other end of the spectrum, the cheapest books on the list are Tip Top Comics number 29, very affordable at only $39 for a low-grade copy. Famous Funnies number 50 celebrated its special anniversary issue, the first comic to ever reach 50 issues, also worth $39. And then in high grade, Tip Top Comics 29 is the cheapest comic at $520 for a near mint 9.2 copy based on the Overstreet price guide. However, once we look closer at the CGC census, we'll see that even though there is near mint prices in the Overstreet guide, most of these books do not actually exist in this condition, and the majority have no copies graded at all. So if we use an estimate of 200,000 copies printed on average for each of these comics, that would mean this month there were 4.6 million comics printed and sold. Out of that, only 118 copies in all conditions, including restored books, have been graded by CGC. And out of the 4.6 million books, only 14 of them have survived in high grade and have been graded by CGC. The most common graded books to survive in high grade are Mickey Mouse Magazine, number 36. There are 4 high grade copies. This is due to there being at least one, if not more, file copies that have survived from Western Publishing. Also higher is Super Comics, number 5, also from Western, so likely there's a file copy there. And Crackajack Funnies, number 4, is also from Western, so likely a file copy there. After that, the most common high-grade book here is New Adventure Comics number 30 from DC Comics. There's 2 copies that have survived, and hefty price tag on that one. Notice in general that more than half of the comics on this list can be purchased still for under $100. And there's quite a few hovering around the $50 mark, making this as quite affordable. If you wanted to, in fact, buy a complete set of all of these books in low grade, the current price guide total is just over $10,000 for low grade and over $167,000 for high grade. This total of 23 comics is tied as the highest number of comic titles ever up to this point, tying with July 1938, which also had 23 titles. There are 5 different comics this particular month that have 0 copies graded by the CGC in any condition. Now, this is partially due to the fact that they don't have a lot of hype, not huge high price tags, so dealers probably have just decided it's not worth grading them. But the reality is, if there were any higher grade copies out there, usually retailers will grade them. So this just shows the extreme rarity of these books. because Feature Funnies, number 12, just as an example, 0 copies graded in any condition. This is a $735 book. No copies. Again, they are likely out there. And I've used a general census. There's no way to prove this. I've usually said that I usually think that a quarter of all copies of a book have been graded by CGC. Meaning if 20 copies have been graded by CGC, then I estimate that there's 80 actual copies in existence. Again, this is just using a real quick estimate. There's no proof of this. But what happens if we put the CGC census at 0? Well, then of course this throws off this system. And are we going to estimate there's only 4 copies non-graded? Doesn't seem likely. Thing to keep in mind is that these books are 80 years old. They are out there. Collectors have ordered them for years, so they're out there. But I challenge you to go on eBay and other auction sites and stuff and just look for how many there are. For example, some of these titles, Heritage Comics, in 15 years of selling comics, has only sold 1 copy of many of these particular books. So that does help establish. And of course, the Gerber system shows the rarity, and they usually rate most of these books as having 50 or less copies in existence for comics of this age. At this point, over 450 comics had been published in the standard modern format, as comics had been around for 5 years already at this point. But we call it month number 4 because we started with the debut of Superman.